Before we dive into the forgotten kingdoms of Arabia, make sure to hit subscribe so you never miss a story history tried to bury. The desert wind howls like a ghost, carrying with it the scent of blood, incense and camel sweat. Imagine a lone rider cloaked in black, galloping beneath a crimson sky. He is not a king nor a prophet, just a messenger, clutching a scroll sealed with wax. That parchment bears a secret, the shifting power of Arabia, centuries before Islam would rise. Most people today believe the Arabian Peninsula was nothing but barren sands, home only to wandering Bedouins, but they are wrong. Beneath the dunes lay kingdoms, mighty, wealthy and ambitious, that traded with Rome, Persia and Byzantium. Their walls rose from the desert like mirages, their kings crowned in gold, their warriors feared across empires. Yet today, they are forgotten. Our story begins with whispers of war. Between two of the greatest of these kingdoms, Himyar in the south, where incense made men richer than kings, and Ghassan in the north, guardians of the Byzantine frontier. Between them lay deserts crawling with bandits, merchants, and spies. Picture the bustling market of Najran. Merchants shout in Arabic, Aramaic, and Greek, their stalls stacked with frankincense, pearls, silk, and weapons. A Himyarite trader boasts of his king's wealth, while a Ghassanid envoy smirks, reminding him that Byzantine gold flows endlessly into Ghassanid coffers. Their words cut like blades, and soon fists fly, knives flash, and the market erupts in chaos. From a rooftop, a young boy named Malik watches in awe. His father pulls him back, whispering, "Remember this. Son, the kingdoms of Arabia are not mere tribes. They are wolves circling each other, waiting for the kill." Malik does not yet know it, but he will one day march under banners that will decide Arabia's fate. Far to the south, in the Himyarite capital of Zafar, the king sits in a torchlit hall. Bronze lamps flicker against walls, painted with scenes of conquest. A messenger kneels, delivering news of Ghassanid alliances with Byzantium. The king's jaw tightens. If the north bows to Rome, then we shall bend Arabia to our will. His voice echoes like thunder, sending shivers through the courtiers. But as kings plot, empires tremble. In Constantinople, Rome watches the Arab kingdoms with suspicion. In Ctesiphon, the Persian Shah snarls at the thought of losing trade routes to desert upstarts. Arabia, once ignored, is becoming a chessboard of global powers. And the kingdoms themselves, driven by pride, faith, and ambition, are marching toward destiny. The boy Malik, still peering from his rooftop, does not hear the sound of hooves approaching Najran. A column of armored riders thunders into view, their banners snapping like flames in the wind. The Ghassanids have come, and with them the desert is about to burn. The forgotten kingdoms awaken, and their clash will echo across the centuries. The dust rose first, thick and choking, before the riders appeared. Dozens of horses thundered into Najran, their hooves striking the earth like drums of war. At their head rode a man draped in Byzantine silk, his eyes sharp as steel. This was Al-Harith ibn Jabala, king of the Ghassanids, vassal to the mighty Byzantines, and lord of the northern frontier. The townspeople scattered, pulling children into alleys, slamming doors shut. Malik, the wide-eyed boy from the rooftops, clung to his father's arm. His father whispered, "That man bends the knee to Rome, but his sword is Arab. Remember his face, my son. He is both protector and predator." Al-Harith dismounted slowly, surveying the market still reeking of spilled wine and blood from the earlier brawl. His voice cut through the silence. "Najran is under Ghassan's protection. To him your right hand shall touch this city without consequence." The declaration was as much for Constantinople as it was for the townsfolk. To Rome, the Ghassanids were loyal guardians of the desert frontier, keeping Persian influence at bay. But to Arabs, they were kings in their own right, rulers, who carved palaces of stone in the wilderness, their halls echoing with poetry and intrigue. Yet protection came with a price. Taxes, tribute, loyalty. Some bowed willingly. Others whispered curses when Ghassanid soldiers passed by. That night, torches blazed across Najran Square. The Ghassanid king sat beneath a canopy, drinking spiced wine, while local chieftains bowed reluctantly. One elder, his beard white as salt, dared to speak. "King of Ghassan, we are Arabs, not Romans. Will you guard us as brothers, or sell us as slaves to Byzantium. The crowd gasped. Soldiers reached for their swords, but Al-Harith only smiled, the kind of smile that freezes blood. "Old man," he said softly, "Rome needs me. Byzantium fears the desert, and you need my shield. Without it, Himyar will burn this city to the ground. Choose your master wisely." From the shadows, Malik listened, his heart pounding. He could feel the tension crackle like fire. One wrong word and Najran would drown in blood. But before the elder could reply, another sound pierced the night, the distant horn of approaching riders. Panic spread like wildfire. The Ghassanid guards leapt to their feet, swords flashing. A scout raced into the square, breathless, shouting, "The Himyarites are here!" Torches flared along the southern horizon, a sea of flickering light. From the desert came the thunder of drums, the clash of bronze, the cries of men ready for conquest. Al-Harith's smile vanished. He rose, cloak whipping in the night wind, and drew his sword. The forgotten kingdoms were no longer whispering threats in markets. They were unsheathing steel. And Najran was about to become their battlefield. The desert trembled with the pounding of war drums. From the southern horizon, the Himyarite host emerged like a storm. Torches bobbed in the darkness, thousands of them turning the night sky red. At their head rode King Yusuf Asar Yathar, known to his enemies as Du, Nuwas, his black hair spilling over armor studded with gold, his eyes burning with fury. Najran's walls shook with fear. Families huddled inside their homes, clutching children close. Malik's father barred the door with trembling hands, whispering prayers. Yet the boy could not resist. He climbed back to the roof, desperate to witness history unfolding before his eyes. From the northern gate, Al-Harith and his Ghassanid warriors braced themselves. Shields overlapped, spears gleamed. Byzantine-trained cavalry stood ready, their helmets shining beneath torchlight. The Ghassanid king raised his sword to the heavens, his voice booming across the square. "Najran will not fall tonight. The desert does not bow to Himyar." The Himyarite war horns answered, deep and mournful, shaking the very earth. Then came the charge. Horses screamed. Arrows hissed. The night exploded in chaos as Himyarite cavalry crashed against Ghassanid shields. Spears splintered, men roared. The clash of iron echoed through the streets. Najran's markets, so recently filled with merchants' laughter, were now drenched in blood. Malik's eyes stung from smoke. Flames licked the wooden stalls, consuming silks, oils, and spices. The boy could smell burning incense and charred flesh mingling in the air. Below, a Ghassanid soldier staggered, an arrow buried in his chest. Another fell, trampled beneath horses. The boy bit his lip to keep from screaming. In the heart of the melee, the two kings found each other. Nuwas swung his blade with terrifying strength, cutting down a Ghassanid knight in a single strike. Al-Harith parried another blow, sparks flying in the dark. For a heartbeat, the kings locked eyes, two wolves circling in the firelight. But before they could clash again, a horn sounded from the eastern hills. Both armies froze, confusion spreading like a ripple through the crowd. Shadows moved on the ridges. Another force was arriving. Whispers darted through the ranks. Romans, Persians, bandits? Neither Ghassanid nor Himyarite knew the answer. Al-Harith's face hardened. He gestured for his men to hold the line, but uncertainty gnawed at him. Nuwas snarled. His attack halted, his fury now mixed with suspicion. Who dared intervene in this battle of kings? From the ridge, torches lit the silhouette of riders descending, their banners unfamiliar, their chants strange. The desert seemed to hold its breath. Malik gripped the rooftop stone so tightly his knuckles bled. His young heart raced with terror and wonder, for in that moment, a new power was about to step onto Arabia's stage, one that would change the fate of kingdoms forever. The desert ridge glowed with fire. Torches lined the horizon like a crown of flames, and from the darkness came riders cloaked in crimson. Their armor was not Ghassanid bronze nor Himyarite iron. These men rode beneath banners stitched with the crescent of Persia. Gasps rippled through Najran. The Lakhmids, someone whispered, fear choking the word. Allies of the Persians, rivals of the Ghassanids. Their arrival was like a blade sliding between ribs. King Al-Harith's jaw clenched. He had fought these desert lords before, men hardened in the crucible of Mesopotamia. The Lakhmids answered to the Shah in Ctesiphon, guardians of Persia's southern frontier. Their leader tonight was Al-Mundhir ibn an-Nu'man. a name that struck dread into the hearts of Arabs. Ruthless, cunning and merciless, he was a king who thrived on chaos. From the ridge, Al-Mundhir's voice thundered, carried by the desert wind. Brothers of Arabia, why spill your blood for Rome or Himyar? Tonight Najran belongs to those strong enough to take it. The Himyarites roared, the Ghassanids snarled, and for a moment it seemed the world itself tilted into madness. 3 kingdoms, 3 wolves, all circling the same prey. The battle reignited. Lakhmid cavalry swept down the hills like a tide of shadows, their lances tearing through Ghassanid lines. Al-Harith cursed, rallying his men, but the Persians' desert allies fought with savage precision. Himyarite warriors, seeing their chance, surged forward too, eager to carve Ghassanid flesh while their enemy reeled. Najran became a furnace. Fire devoured wooden homes. Sparks leapt into the night sky. Screams mingled with the clash of steel. Malik clung to the rooftop, his face blackened with soot. He watched as men were cut down, their blood soaking into sand that seemed to drink it greedily. Somewhere in the chaos, a woman's wail pierced the air. Malik turned to see her dragged by soldiers, Lakhmid raiders, laughing as they hauled spoils of war. His father seized him, pulling him back inside. "Close your eyes, boy. Do not look." But Malik's eyes refused to close. In the square, Al-Harith fought like a lion cornered. His blade cut down 2 Lakhmid riders, his cloak torn and spattered with blood. Across the battlefield, Du Nuwas shouted orders, his fury blazing as his Himyarites pressed the Ghassanids harder. Yet the Lakhmids had no allegiance to either side. They struck both, bleeding the desert kingdoms for Persia's gain. Al-Mundhir himself carved through the melee, his war cry shaking even seasoned soldiers. As dawn's first light touched the horizon, Najran's skyline was black with smoke. The city was breaking. Families fled, clutching what little they could carry. And on that rooftop, young Malik realized the truth. Arabia was not a land of forgotten tribes. It was a chessboard, and its kingdoms were pieces in a game played by empires. But in games of empires, pawns are the first to die. Morning came, but the sun rose upon ruins. Najran smoldered like a dying fire. Its markets charred, its temples collapsed, its streets littered with the bodies of warriors and innocents alike. Smoke curled into the sky, blotting out the light, as if even the heavens wished to hide from the horror below. Malik stumbled barefoot through the ashes, his father clutching his hand tightly. Around them, survivors wailed over the dead. A woman tore her veil in grief, rocking the lifeless body of her child. Men dug shallow graves with trembling hands, their sobs drowned by the cawing of crows. The city had not been conquered. It had been consumed. Ghassanid soldiers limped through the wreckage, bloodied and beaten, dragging comrades who moaned in agony. Their king, Al-Harith, stood among them, his face hollow, his once proud cloak shredded and blackened. He had held Najran, but at a terrible price. Across the field, Himyarite banners still fluttered. Du Nuwas had pulled back his men at dawn, but not before exacting his vengeance. He watched the burning city from a distant hill, his eyes cold, his lips whispering a vow. Najran will bleed again, by my hand or by the gods themselves. But the worst wound was yet unseen. The Lakhmids had not sought victory. They had sought devastation. Al-Mundhir's raiders carried away captives, loot and horses, vanishing into the desert night like jackals. Their attack left both Himyar and Ghassan weakened, precisely what Persia desired. In Constantinople, whispers would soon spread of Ghassan's failure. In Ctesiphon, the Shah would smile at the thought of Arab kingdoms bleeding one another. Najran was no longer a city. It was a message. Arabia could be broken. Malik and his father found shelter in the ruined temple of Najran's Christians. Charred crosses lay shattered on the floor, their edges still glowing with embers. A priest, his robe singed, whispered prayers over the wounded, tears streaking his soot-stained face. Malik clutched his chest, where smoke still burned his lungs, and asked, "Father, why did the kings do this?" His father's voice cracked. "Because, my son, power is hungrier than mercy, and men who chase it will burn the world." That night, silence fell over Najran like a shroud. The city lay in mourning, its people broken, its streets empty but for the echo of memory. Yet beneath the ashes something darker stirred, a seed of vengeance, a hunger for retribution that would not die with the flames. For Nuwas had seen Najran's faith, its crosses, its prayers to a god foreign to him, and deep within his heart, a fury was kindled, one that would ignite not just Najran but all of Arabia. The smoke of Najran would not fade into the sky. It would rise again in fire, in faith, and in blood. The desert wind carried whispers of vengeance. Weeks after Najran's burning, the Himyarite king, Nuwas, sat in his great hall of Zafar, the torches blazing high against painted walls. His throne was carved from ebony, his crown heavy with gold, but it was his eyes that burned brighter than any jewel. He had tasted blood, and it was not enough. Before him his advisors knelt, their voices trembling as they spoke of the city's resilience. Najran's people, though scarred, still clung to their faith, the cross raised once more above their temple. To Nuwas it was an insult carved into his very flesh. He rose, cloak sweeping across the marble floor. "If they bow to Rome's god, then they betray Arabia," he thundered. "If they raise the cross, then they raise a sword against Himyar. I will answer with fire." The hall trembled with his fury. Messengers rode out, carrying his command. "Assemble the armies. Light the torches. Sharpen the blades." This was no longer war for land or gold. This was holy vengeance. Najran's people felt the shadow before they saw it. One morning the horizon shimmered with heat, and then with steel. Thousands of Himyarite warriors surrounded the city like a tightening noose. Their shields gleamed, their banners rippled, their chants echoed across the sand. Inside the walls panic spread. Families huddled in the church, clutching icons and whispering prayers. The priests urged faith, promising that Rome would not abandon them. But Malik's father, now gaunt from hunger, shook his head. "Rome is far. Himyar is here." At dawn the attack began. Himyarite soldiers stormed the gates with battering rams, their war cries shattering the morning calm. Arrows rained down from the walls, but the defenders were too few, too weary. The gates splintered, the city shuddered, and Najran was swallowed once more by fire. Malik clung to his father as flames roared through the streets. He saw neighbors dragged from their homes, crosses torn from walls, priests cut down at the altar. The stench of burning wood and flesh filled the air until breathing became agony. And then came the king. Nuwas himself rode through the smoke on a white stallion, his armor gleaming, his sword dripping red. He looked upon the terrified Christians and raised his voice like thunder. "You choose the God of Rome? Then you choose death." Some begged for mercy. Others clutched their children, refusing to renounce their faith. The king's fury was merciless. Fires were lit, trenches dug. Prisoners were driven into them. The earth itself turned into a furnace. From the flames, Malik heard the screams that would haunt him until his last breath. The massacre of Najran had begun, and Arabia would never be the same again. The smoke of Najran did not stay in the desert. It rose higher, carried by wind and rumor, until it reached the ears of kings far beyond Arabia. What Nuwas believed to be his triumph became a cry of horror that thundered across the world. Merchants fled north with tales of trenches filled with fire, of Christians burned alive for refusing to renounce their faith. In caravans across the Levant, in markets of Jerusalem and Damascus, the stories spread like wildfire. Priests wept as they preached of martyrs. Roman officials, sharpening their quills, recorded every word. In Constantinople, the great dome of Hagia Sophia rang with hymns of mourning. The emperor, Justin I, an old soldier with a trembling hand, read the reports by candlelight. His advisors pressed him, "Sire, the Ghassanids are loyal. They fight in Rome's name, but Himyar has become the enemy of the cross." The emperor's eyes hardened. Then the desert must be answered with the sea. Across the Red Sea, in the highlands of Abyssinia, the Christian king Caleb of Axum sat upon a throne of ivory. His priests brought word of Najran, their voices breaking with grief. Caleb rose, his golden crown glinting in the torchlight. "If Arabia burns the faithful, then Abyssinia shall quench the flames." His vow echoed through his court like a war drum. Meanwhile in Persia, the Shahanshah Kavadai listened with cold amusement. The Himyarite king had slaughtered Rome's flock, and that meant weakness for Byzantium. Persia, ever the rival, saw opportunity in the ashes of Najran. He ordered his Lakhmid allies to press harder, to keep Ghassan bleeding. Arabia, torn apart by faith and empire, was becoming the Shah's game board. Back in the desert, Malik wandered through the ruins of his city. His father had not survived the fire pits. His cry still rang in the boy's ears. Alone among corpses, he stumbled upon a small wooden cross. Blackened by smoke but unbroken, he held it tightly, whispering, "They will not forget. Someone will avenge us." His words carried truth he could not yet see. For far away, in palaces of stone and temples of gold, kings sharpened their swords in his name. Though not for him, but for power, for faith, for empire, Najran was no longer a city. It was a symbol. To Rome it was a call to holy war. To Abyssinia it was a cry for brotherhood. To Persia it was a weapon to weaken their enemies. And to Dunuas, still seated in his hall, it was only the beginning. He did not yet know that by igniting Najran, he had set the entire world ablaze. The Red Sea was stirring, and across its waters, vengeance was sailing toward Himyar. The Red Sea was restless, its waves thrashing like war drums. On the horizon, sails rose, hundreds of them, white against the dawn. The Abyssinian king, Caleb of Axum, had answered Najran's cry. His fleet cut across the waters like a wall of vengeance, carrying warriors clad in iron, priests clutching crosses, and banners painted with the blood-red symbol of the faith. From the shore of Arabia, fishermen stared in awe. Never had the desert seen such a sight. Ships vast as mountains, their oars striking in perfect rhythm. News spread like wildfire. Abyssinia had come, and it came with the fury of heaven. Caleb himself stood at the prow of his flagship, his cloak whipping in the sea wind. His voice carried across the fleet. "Children of Axum, brothers of the cross, Najran's blood cries from the earth. Today we answer with steel. Today we cleanse the desert of its tyrant." The men roared, their spears lifted high, their chants rolling like thunder across the waters. In Zafar, Dunuas received word of the invasion. The messenger trembled as he spoke of the fleet, his voice breaking under the weight of fear. The Himyarite king slammed his fist against the throne. "Let Abyssinia come. Arabia is no slave to the cross." Yet even his bravado could not silence the dread whispering in his court. Abyssinia was no desert kingdom. It was an empire of highlands and armies, its power blessed by Byzantium itself. As the Abyssinian army stormed the beaches of Arabia, the clash shook the sands. Shields rang, swords flashed, and cries filled the sky. Himyarite cavalry charged, dust rising in clouds, their lances aimed at the invaders. But the Abyssinians held firm, their lines disciplined, their faith unshaken. Malik, now a boy hardened by grief, hid among refugees near the coast. He watched the Abyssinian warriors march, their armor glinting like sunlight, their priests raising crosses that gleamed against the smoke of battle. For the first time since Najran's fall, hope flickered in his chest. But Dunuas was not a man to bow easily. He led his warriors into the fray, his sword cleaving through Abyssinian shields. His white stallion reared, its hooves striking men down. His voice roared above the chaos. "Arabia is mine. Let the sea swallow your crosses." Yet even a king's fury could not turn the tide of empire. The Abyssinians pressed forward relentlessly, their numbers overwhelming, their cause burning with divine zeal. Step by bloody step they pushed Himyar back. By nightfall the sands were crimson. The air stank of salt and blood. The Abyssinians had landed, and they were not leaving. The war for Arabia had begun, and Dunuas would face his reckoning in the fire he once unleashed. The desert groaned under the weight of marching armies. Abyssinian banners stretched for miles across the sands, a tide of iron and faith pressing deeper into Himyarite lands. Villages that once bent to Dunuas now opened their gates to Caleb's soldiers, offering water, bread, and trembling prayers. To them the invaders were not conquerors but avengers. In Zafar, Dunuas raged like a storm. His throne room shook with his fury. Messengers knelt before him, confessing defeat after defeat, their voices quivering. "The Abyssinians push inland, my king. Their numbers are endless. Even the tribes turn against us." Dunuas struck the marble floor with his sword. "Let them betray me. Arabia does not belong to Rome's slaves. I will burn the sea itself before I kneel." His words rang with fire, but in his court, fear spread like smoke. As the Abyssinian army closed in, Malik, now wandering as a refugee, watched the columns of soldiers sweep through the desert. He clutched the charred wooden cross he had saved from Najran, whispering, "This is for you, father." To him, Caleb's warriors were instruments of justice, blades forged by grief. The final clash came near the coast, where the Red Sea kissed Arabia's cliffs. Du-Nuwas assembled what remained of his Himyarite host, cavalry battered, spears broken, yet eyes still burning with loyalty. From his white stallion the king raised his sword. "Men of Himyar, we fight not for Rome nor for Persia, but for Arabia itself. Let the sands drink their blood." The armies collided with thunder. Abyssinian shields locked, their spears thrust forward in disciplined waves. The Himyarites charged like a whirlwind, their horses screaming, their blades striking with desperate ferocity. The ground shook, the sky blackened with dust and arrows. Du-Nuwas fought at the front, his sword a storm of steel. He struck down an Abyssinian captain, cut through another, his roar echoing across the cliffs. But numbers crushed valor. For every man he slew, 10 more pressed forward. Slowly the Himyarite line buckled, splintering beneath the weight of empire. By dusk, the sands were littered with Himyar's dead. Abyssinian horns blared triumphantly, their banners raised high. The desert kingdom that once burned Najran was broken. But Du-Nuwas would not be taken. As night fell, he rode to the cliff's edge, the Red Sea raging below. His stallion reared, mane whipping in the salt wind. He looked once more toward the desert, his kingdom lost, his vengeance undone. Then, with a cry that split the night, he spurred his horse forward. Man and beast leapt into the black waves, swallowed by the sea's fury. The Fire King was gone, but his flames would haunt Arabia for centuries to come. The waves swallowed Du-Nuwas, and with him, the Himyarite kingdom fell. The Abyssinians raised their banners over Zafar, their crosses gleaming in the sun, where once the fire pits had burned. Arabia's south, rich with incense and trade, now bowed to a foreign crown. At first the victors proclaimed triumph. Priests sang hymns in Najran's rebuilt churches, praising the martyrs whose cries had brought an empire across the sea. The emperor in Constantinople rejoiced, for Byzantium's faith now stretched into Arabia's heart, and King Caleb of Axum, returning to his throne of ivory, was hailed as a defender of the cross. But the desert remembers. The Abyssinian garrisons soon learned the truth. Arabia would never bend easily. The tribes of the highlands rose in rebellion, striking from cliffs and valleys. Caravans were raided, soldiers ambushed, priests slain in secret. The conquerors were strangers on a land that yielded to none. And in the north, the Ghassanids, still loyal to Byzantium, watched uneasily. Their rivals, the Lakhmids, continued to sharpen their blades at Persia's command. Arabia was no longer the silent frontier between empires. It had become the battleground of worlds. Among the ruins of Najran, Malik grew into a man. His childhood was scarred by fire, but his spirit was hardened like steel. He joined the ranks of wandering tribes, carrying with him the memory of martyrs, the vision of kingdoms lost, the bitterness of betrayal by kings who chose power over mercy. He would tell their stories by firelight, of Himyar's arrogance, of Ghassan's pride, of Lakhmid treachery, of Abyssinian conquest. His words carried across caravans and camps, reminding Arabs that their land was not empty sand, but the soil of kingdoms, soaked in the blood of ancestors. And so, while empires schemed, the desert itself began to awaken. The memory of forgotten kings lingered in its winds, their triumphs, their ruins, their mistakes. From the ashes of Najran and the cliffs of Zafar, from the palaces of Ghassan and the towers of Hira, Arabia carried scars, scars that would one day shape destiny. For soon, from this land of forgotten kingdoms, a new voice would rise. Not a king crowned in gold, nor a warlord with foreign allies, but a prophet with words mightier than armies. His call would unite tribes once divided, heal wounds carved by vengeance, and turn the desert from a chessboard of empires into the heart of a civilization. The kingdoms of Himyar, Ghassan, and Lakhmid, though forgotten by many, were not erased. They were prologue, for before Islam, Arabia burned with kingdoms of fire and faith, and from their ashes, a light would rise to change the world forever. If you loved this journey through Arabia's lost empires, subscribe now, because the past still has secrets waiting to be uncovered.